seems to be surging, even though ABC moderators fact check Donald Trump that crime is not out of control, that we don't have gang violence, that we don't have higher murder. We've got so much going on in international news and upcoming election. To help me go through all of it, I have former CIA analyst J. Michael Waller. Michael, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's good to be back with you, Stephen.
Yes, my audience seems to like you, and I do too. So, just some background. Michael is a senior analyst for strategy at the Center for Security Policy. He is a former CIA asset. He's been published in the New York Post, Washington Examiner, the Federalist, and the Wall Street Journal. He's also the author of Big Intel. Michael, every day I am reading about this Tren De Aragua gang from Venezuela causing terror all over the United States. We used to read about them coming in one at a time. Nobody seemed to care. Now they are grouping up. They're meeting up. I'm reading now just this morning that they are running underground sex trafficking operations. And the U.S. government seems to be covering their crimes in order to avoid attention on illegal immigrants. What do you think is going on with the cover-up with this Tren De Aragua gangs that are flooding the United States?
Well, first of all, nothing makes sense until you realize that this is being done on purpose. This is the Biden Harris administration and people like Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas, who are purposely letting these people in and purposely covering it up. This is not incompetence. We don't know why. We just know that this is what they're deliberately doing. So you have on the one hand with the Tren De Aragua gangs, these are the most serious gangs anyone's ever seen. They are worse than MS-13. They're worse than any of the gangs in LA. These guys are more vicious than anything our country has seen. And you can see now they're being located in cities and towns all over our country. So the gangs themselves, they're from Venezuela. They were allowed and even encouraged to leave Venezuela by the Venezuelan government as part of the Venezuelan regime's release of hardcore prisoners by the thousands into the United States. This was a deliberate policy of the Venezuelan regime to wage an unconventional war against us. So now you can see it happening. You can see the gangs fighting other gangs. You can see the gangs killing, raping, committing terrible crimes against American citizens. And the administration doesn't want us to know what the administration has done.
Yeah, that's my thing. I keep thinking this has to be purposeful, right? Everyone keeps telling me Alejandro Mayorkas is genius level. He knows what he's doing. He has a plan. He is executing on that successfully. It just happens to be the opposite of what most of us want. And now, I mean, just like I'm just seeing, like, I look at like Aurora, Colorado, and the story used to be that they're taking over apartment complexes, but now I'm seeing what they're doing in big box retail stores, the way they're harassing people in parking lots. They're going to truck stops and basically telling these people, you're going to wake up dead if you don't give us money. They're threatening the truckers. I mean, this could throw off the economic flow of goods. It is really bad. Any idea why they might be doing this? Is this just to sow chaos? I can't believe that this could be replacement theory, because why would you want to replace, good, hardworking Americans with these violent gangs?
Well, it is part of replacement theory, because you can't have replacement theory until you've intimidated the rest of the population into submission. And when you're going after, remember the taking over the apartment buildings in Colorado was a conspiracy theory, right? Allowing the gangs into this country was a conspiracy theory. So all of these conspiracy theories are coming true. And we're finding now that it's in the interests of the Venezuelan regime, which is a tool of the Cuban regime in many ways. It's funding and fueling the Cuban regime, but the Cuban secret services pretty much run Venezuela. But Venezuela has been taken over itself by $1 trillion petro-narco cartel that's allied with Russia, Iran, China, Cuba, North Korea, all of our enemies, Hezbollah, and they're working together. And the Biden Harris administration is letting that regime, without any price to pay, empty its prisons and flood our country with the worst elements that that country can even produce. Even to the point where the Venezuelan government, the prison officials, allowed prisoners out of prison as long as they would murder a democracy protester. They'd go back to prison and then get a pass to leave the country to come up into the United States. So they're training people to murder before allowing them to leave prison to come to America.
Wow. I don't know if you've seen the pictures online, but down in El Salvador, they did this like 72-hour mission a few years ago where they rounded up all the gangs. Now you see all these men, rows and rows of men, shirtless, shaved head, tattoos all over their face. They're chained, literally chained, and they're in these mega prisons. Imagine those being opened up and flooded into the United States. I believe that's kind of what we're seeing with these Venezuelan gangs.
Yeah, except the Venezuelan gangs are even worse than the Salvadoran gangs. They'll cut off your fingers one by one and send a video home to your mother, forcing her to watch it, and then they'll cut off a hand, and then they'll just slash you up so you bleed out.
Oh my gosh. And Kamala Harris in charge of the border, Alejandro in charge of the border, they don't care about any of this.
Why haven't they said anything about it? Really? Why haven't they said I mean, they haven't owned up to it. Instead, Mayorkas just made a statement recently saying that it's Congress's fault that it hasn't provided enough money for border security. So they're obscuring this whole thing. But if just think of it though, think of it from a counterintelligence perspective. Why would a guy like Mayorkas be doing this? Now, to look at his origins. He was born in Cuba. He came here as a infant to the United States. Almost everybody from that generation, we're about the same age. Almost every Cuban of that generation is hardcore anti-communist, except for those who were later recruited by the regime. So you kind of have to wonder, what counterintelligence dimension is there that our FBI is not even looking at, that our CIA has overlooked, that might be influencing the decisions or even making the decisions that are causing this invasion of our country?
Wow, that's terrifying. And if Harris stays in, she's made it very clear she's not going to change the border. She's not going back to remain in Mexico. She's not going back to deport people. She's not doing anything. I mean, they won't even. They're instructing people in San Diego Border Patrol to cover up crimes,
Yep.
to not report the numbers. I think the former head of Border Patrol just came out and said direct orders from the Biden-Harris administration: do not honestly report your numbers. I mean, this is terrifying stuff.
It is. I was down on the border last summer, right where the at the delta of the Rio Grande on SpaceX property. SpaceX owns that land, and I was down there to witness the illegal crossings of the human cartels, the drug cartels, the sex cartels, and the gun cartels. And we went down with electronic gear, imaging gear, and radio intercept gear, and we could hear the three cartels talking. So they were coming right across the border. We could watch them assemble on the Mexican side, and then watch them remotely from 2 miles away as they were crossing through the marshlands into Texas. And the Border Patrol, there was one Border Patrol agent there, and we talked to him, and he said it's only him. Only one person per shift, and there's really almost nothing they can do about it because that is all that's been resourced to that area.
Well, between Harris and Trump is the only one talking about closing the border, potentially using the U.S. military on the border, remain in Mexico, round up 1 million criminals, ship them back. If he can get back in, is this something he's going to be able to do? Or do we have people like Norm Eisen and Mark Elias and others that are already preparing lawsuits to block him from being able to actually have positive influence on the border?
Well, these lawsuits are designed to keep this Mayorkas operation going. So you have to wonder, who are these people filing these lawsuits to keep our borders open? Who are they? Why are they doing it? This is all being done, if we don't have a military defending our borders, what do we have a military for?
Yeah, right now, I guess it's just to be in 800 bases around the world,
Yeah,
not, not defending our own country, the main purpose of a military.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm all for Trump. If they're not gonna let him build that wall, Trump should just declare all cartels and all cartel members and all their facilitators to be enemies of the United States and make them military targets and drone every last one of them. We've
Could
seen the wonders that Ukraine can do with long-range drones and with short-range anti-personnel drones to go after individuals. You program 1,000 drones, attach them to the cell phones of 1,000 targets, and then just let them loose and just wipe out these cartels right away. And any of the politicians, foreign other figures, they're all military targets. And then that will certainly change the conduct of people here in the United States who are helping.
as commander in chief, would Trump have the authority to rearrange the military in that fashion?
He'll just have to do it. Look at what Biden and Harris have been doing, rearranging our military. I mean, Trump did create the Space Forces. He created a whole military service on his own. He got Congress behind it. But certainly, if a president can send troops without a War Powers Act resolution, then he can certainly send drones without a War Powers Act resolution. And we're talking small anti-personnel drones targeted at individuals. We're not talking, you know, big operations with collateral damage against innocent people.
Could could these gangs be labeled domestic terrorists, and that gives a different level of power and authority to get them out of the country?
Well, if people like you and I can potentially be labeled domestic terrorists by the current occupants of the White House and their sponsors, uh, yes. I mean, if under the law, if these gangs are terrorizing people for the purpose of achieving a political objective, they do fall under the legal purview of terrorists. If they're merely committing criminal activities, they do not. So, until Tren De Aragua can be shown to be pushing a political agenda, which it might be able to be if it's organizing and taking political control over buildings and villages and towns in the country, then certainly they've become a political entity, and one would argue that they would be a terrorist organization.
Okay. Because when I hear what they're doing, I don't say, "Oh, that's criminal." My brain thinks that's terrifying, right? Terror. They're literally creating terror. They're sowing terror. They're using terror to get compliance out of citizens, out of truckers, out of government.
Right, right. So if I mean the left has applied terrorism statutes very liberally, and on people who aren't terrorizing, they're just being loud or annoying or trespassing or whatever else. And so this has been tried against them. It's been done not with much success, but they're still trying. But when you have people who are literally using force or threatening deadly force against innocent people to get some sort of compliance on them, it's not simply individual crimes of violence that are state crimes. These are crimes that are orchestrated and organized to achieve a political objective, which in the case of Tren De Agua would be either political control over populations in the United States or to influence the politics of the United States.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Yesterday, Donald Trump said in order to lower numbers at the border, Biden and Harris have been secretly flying hundreds of thousands of illegals into small towns. He says it's destroying small town America, and it will stop on the day he takes oath again. He said these people must be sent back home, and we must rebuild the unique culture of these small American cities. Again, I feel like Democrats in Congress are going to do everything they can to stop him. Are they that desperate for votes that they would, keep the United States hostage? Why? I just don't understand the thinking.
Well, remember, Barack Obama said he was going to fundamentally transform the United States of America. This is part of the fundamental transformation. There's a huge amount of donor money, philanthropic money, NGO money, and taxpayer money that's being funneled through NGOs. So this is a huge, many multi-billion dollar industry. So a lot of people, they don't care about the future generations of our country or the traditions of our country. And as long as these people are stuck in areas where they don't live, the sponsors are fine with that. But they're literally trying to destroy our country. It's not like these are illegals that are near the border coming over. These are people being flown in from Africa and Turkey and all over the world straight to come into here. People being flown straight up from Haiti straight to come up here. People who don't add any value to our society. Most of them are not educated. Most of them have no loyalty to the United States. They have no desire to assimilate with the United States. They don't have the skills that are needed in our country that we don't have right now. They don't bring anything to us except being a burden on cities and towns and taxpayers, a financial burden, but a social burden. Imagine crowding these kids into the already substandard public school systems that we have and changing the whole cultures of entire towns, having the central government impose them on these towns at the town's own expense and without any people voting for it, without the town approving it, just saying, boom, you're here. And meanwhile, the people behind this are living in their own gated communities and McMansions and island villas and so forth. It's outrageous. We have been sabotaged from within. We've allowed these people to take over who have no loyalty to our country, and they're running it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And really, what you can see they're doing is that they want to build America into a one-party state, where you have one political party dominating all three branches of government, dominating industry, dominating regulations, having a huge administrative state apparatus as its arm for handouts and votes to legitimize itself in power, with an electronic voting system to constantly legitimize itself in power, and then a token opposition party that'll go along with 80% of what it wants. That's the uniparty, and that's the swamp. And then everybody else who opposes that is a hater. So that's a federal crime, right? That'd be a hate crime and a potential terrorist. And then it's those people who object to this who get put on the watch lists and so forth, while these real terrorists let in scot-free.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. I covered this in a different show. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but there was a woman who was violated by an illegal immigrant in England, and then she got arrested for complaining, and he got away after violating her. It's like, man, talk about calling good evil and evil good. It's just so backwards. Let's switch gears. I want to talk about this second Trump assassination attempt. This man has no money, according to FBI reports, and somehow he's able to travel to Ukraine, back to the United States, to Hawaii, back to the United States, somehow makes his way to Florida with an illegal weapon as a felon, knows exactly where Donald Trump will be so that he can hide and potentially take out the former president. Now, just this morning, I'm reading that his son has been arrested for having pornography of young children. What the heck is going on with this guy? And then is the FBI going to actually pursue him as the criminal that he is, or is Ron DeSantis of Florida going to have to step in and level heavier charges?
Well, you've got to really hand it to Ron DeSantis for doing a great job by stepping in like this, because the FBI special agent in charge of the Miami field office, who's running the FBI investigation, was such a crazed Trump hater that he had to have his social media scrubbed of his anti-Trump rants as a senior FBI person. You're not supposed to be political in the FBI, but he was. Then before he's named special agent in charge, he scrubs everything. So a lot of guys in the FBI, excuse me, have raised this. They knew him, and to have somebody like that in charge of the investigation, you simply cannot trust not just FBI headquarters, but the Miami field office on an investigation like this. So this is where the states need to assert themselves, like DeSantis has been doing in Florida, to say, you know what, feds, get out of the way. This is our state. The crime was committed here. We don't trust you. we're taking the lead on this investigation. And that's the other thing too. The FBI always has to hog the lead on any investigation that happens in any state. And you look at their news releases and their Twitter X posts, they're constantly claiming credit for things they had little or nothing to do with. It's just because they went in to intervene to take credit away from the local authorities. But in this case, FBI is taking the clues and the evidence away from the local authorities.
Where else did they do this? Oh, yes, Butler, Pennsylvania. Oh, you were a witness to the crime? Go home. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Oh, there's blood on the roof. Get that washed off. We'd hate to have someone come in contact with human blood.
Yeah,
Well,
burn that
let's burn
body.
the body. Unreal. And these are the same people, going after Trump are now the ones put in charge of investigating attempts on his life. It seems very odd that it would be the same organization.
Yeah. And, and it's the same one that set up the whole fake narrative against Trump and really doesn't do much of anything to really get the serious spies who have infiltrated our society.
Yeah. The FBI talks about doing everything they can to have safe and secure elections. I'm reading about Russia, China, Iran now trying to influence the US election. I don't know what's true anymore. Like, I could see them definitely doing that. I could also see Democrats using that as a narrative. How do we figure out what is the truth with election interference from foreign nations?
Well, first of all, we should assume that as the largest, most powerful democracy in the world, all the bad guys are going to be targeting us to influence our elections first to elect candidates beneficial to them. So who would that be? Communist China, Iran, Russia, Cuba, Venezuela. You never hear the FBI talking about Venezuelan attempts to influence our elections when a certain software used in a huge number of our election machines was commissioned by the Venezuelan government to flip an election in Venezuela to keep Hugo Chavez in as dictator through democratic means. So it's the source code on that same software that's operating on so many of the American electoral systems, including places like Georgia, for the purposes of flipping elections. But you never see the FBI talk about that regime, which is the one emptying its prisons into here, also being behind the company that's provided the voting software here. Something's really wrong when this big black hole is not even mentioned in any of our federal law enforcement or election security authorities.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, right now, the Venezuelan presidency is in question because they're saying Maduro rigged the election in order to stay in power, and now they're going back and forth. But yes, yeah, you're right. Of course, other countries would want to influence, but also at the same time, that gave Hillary Clinton a really great cover story with her invented dossier in order to try to make Donald Trump look like he was some kind of Russian spy or a compromised Russian asset.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what kind of diversion have they created to make us look at Russia, which first, Russia has been mucking around in our elections for 100 years, since the 1924 elections. So it's no shocker. Hillary never, and the Democrats never objected to it until it was Hillary's turn. And then you had Angela Davis, the Soviet asset, East German trained, gets on Putin's RT television in June of 2020 to say that she's not running, the Communist Party's not running a candidate this year because they're all going to get behind Joe Biden because they can get more from him. Did you ever hear the Biden administration say anything, or the FBI saying, hey, this is malign foreign influence that's trying to influence our elections from a old Soviet asset now on Putin's TV, saying that they're getting behind Biden? They're not saying any of this, but it's all out there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like they're like, oh, never trust anything coming out of Russia. Russia officially endorses Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Okay, well, we'll take that one. It's like they have endorsed Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Why? Because they see them as weak, feckless leaders that they can take advantage of versus a strong leader like they went up against with Donald Trump in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. Putin endorsed Biden 3 times this year. And then when Biden was pushed aside, he came out and said very nice things about Harris. What does that say?
Yeah.
He's never
It's
said the same thing about Trump. He's
yeah.
but so you dismissed, well, Putin wasn't really serious or he was only joking or whatever. Yeah, he was laughing at the sick ridiculousness of our system right now, but he wasn't joking about his support for Harris.
Yeah.
He said this repeatedly, despite Biden Harris's support for Ukraine, because it's not really threatening Putin's um, strategic goals the way Trump would. The Russians want American leaders who are predictable, who are known quantities. They need to plan carefully ahead, and especially the Chinese, even more so. They need to plan carefully ahead. They don't like wild cards at all. And Trump, even for his best friends, is a complete wild card. He's the worst thing in the world for a hostile foreign leader because those hostile foreign leaders can't plan against him.
Yeah. Michael, have you seen the new Reagan movie?
Not yet.
Oh, it's fantastic. In there, I don't want to give away the main thing, but in there, Russia was tracking Ronald Reagan for almost 30 years because they worried that he could become president and threaten threaten the USSR. And then look what he ends up doing, right? Like it falls, they bring down the wall. But in the movie, they prove that they literally had spies tracking him for decades because he was a wild card. Same thing with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah,
a
he was
wild
a
card.
Democrat anti-communist who testified before Congress about Soviet and communist infiltration of Hollywood. So he was a danger even before he ran for governor of California. So this is what our foreign adversaries do. They map our politicians and other political figures, and they track them early in their careers to see how they can influence public opinion, influence them, influence those around them, to prevent them from getting elected or taking power. And if they are elected, to prevent them from executing their agendas that would be harmful to their interests. So the Soviets did it, the Russians do it, the Chinese do it, all the bad guys do it.
Yeah, it's bizarre just as a normal citizen to think about that. But then, I get this message from Larry Johnson, who is former CIA, that comes on the show, and he lets me know, hey, be careful. You're on Volodymyr Zelensky's death list for telling the truth about the Russia-Ukraine war. Maybe don't head to Ukraine. They're going after journalists, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm just a small fish in a very big pond, and yet they are aware of me and my YouTube channel to the point where I'm now on the kill this guy list over in Ukraine.
Wow. Well,
Yeah.
congratulations. I'm not on it yet.
Gosh, I don't know how to take that as like, okay, you're a truth teller, therefore you're dangerous, or just the fact that like somebody's aware of me and may want to kill me. Both are mixed emotions that way, right?
Well, it reassures you that you really do matter. Sometimes
Yes.
no matter what level you get to, even in the national office or whatever, you still wonder, is it really worth it? Am I making a difference at all? So when you get on a death list of a foreign government, you're making a difference.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to know someone's thinking about me. It's like they say the auto warranty people are always thinking about you, and now I have, I guess, Zelensky and his government thinking about me. So that's nice. Speaking of Ukraine, I'm reading today that Europe is likely funding this war for Russia to attack Ukraine in the form of they need affordable energy. They don't have energy resources. And so they have been quietly, privately, secretly, whatever word you want to use, buying oil out of India, and India is getting it out of Russia. So they're basically funding this war for Vladimir Putin against Ukraine. But then with their words, they say, we support Ukraine against Putin. But
Yeah.
when it comes to the money trail, they're the ones funding it. Have you seen anything about that?
Oh, Europe excels at virtue signaling. They pioneered it. They did it before we did it. And as long as it looks good to them and to the people around them, and as long as they can be trendy and cool, it's fine. It doesn't matter uh, what it really is. So here they're the ones who are wagging the American dog on Ukraine. By the way, I support Ukraine's right to self-defense. I just don't support dragging the United States into somebody else's war when we don't have a defense treaty with them. But that point being aside, if the Europeans are so intent on defeating Russia in Ukraine, why are they buying so much Russian oil that's refined in not only India, but Turkey? So once it's refined into gasoline from those third countries, then the Europeans are fine buying it and they save 5 or 10% on it,
Yeah.
which means it's just their typical cynicism, their typical lack of believing in anything, and their virtue signaling that, oh, we're big fighters against Putin. We're not buying Russian oil. Well, yes, they are, and they are financing Putin's war machine against Ukraine.
Wow. Yeah. It's kind of like when the casinos stopped letting you gamble with real money and you had to put it on a card, right? A hotel card. It's just one step removed away from money. Therefore, it's less addictive, right?
Yeah,
Same,
and it's
same
not
thing
real
here.
money. Yeah,
We're not buying their oil. We're just buying gas from Turkey and India, which happens to come from them. So, but those countries are making a fortune being the middleman.
sure,
Yeah.
sure. Everybody profits from big wars,
Yeah. Okay. Wanted
except
to
the
get
people
your
fighting them.
I want to get your thoughts on Israel now attacking Hezbollah when we all thought that they were just fighting Hamas. Then today I read how all these attacks from Hezbollah up north, Hezbollah is now hiding weapons among civilians and apartment complexes, just like Hamas, in order to throw off Israel and their ability to defend themselves. What is your thought on the current state of the war? Are they going to continue to try to take out Hamas, or are they more distracted by the bigger enemy, which is Iran and Hezbollah?
Well, it's possible to have more than one enemy. And when all those enemies are allied with each other and they're coordinated with each other, you have to fight them all. Israel did a really great job of destroying Hamas's infrastructure and its ability to really wage a coherent fight. And they did it despite intense U.S. pressure from the United States to go easy on Hamas. I mean, can you imagine if Israel had followed U.S. pressure and done a unilateral or an instant ceasefire with Hamas months ago? Can you imagine how strong Hamas would be today? And how much more empowered Iran and Hezbollah would be today because of that. So the Hezbollah aspect of the war came really after Hamas was pretty wiped out, and it wasn't the Israelis that initiated against Hamas. It was Hamas that said, "Okay, we're part of this war effort too," as with Iran, as with the Houthis in Yemen and elsewhere. So Israel has done brilliant work hitting Hamas in Lebanon without doing the civilian damage that a normal war would cause. If you just think of those beepers, the brilliance of getting all those explosives implanted in all those beepers at whatever foreign factory or distribution center that they were done in, specifically so that Hamas or the Iranians would order them for all Hamas personnel and then distributing it the way they did. They didn't use artillery and aircraft that would kill innocent civilians to do it. They just blew up the Hamas operatives and command structure with those beepers and then with the walkie-talkies and so forth. So then when it's time to go in, I'm sorry, that was Hezbollah, not Hamas. So then when it's time to go in and actually get the serious weaponry after blinding and cutting up the command and control of Hezbollah, they geolocated into the exact floors of residences where Hezbollah had been renting space from the private owners of these buildings to have them as arsenals, fuel depots, and drone hangars. And then the Israelis did something really unusual, which was to get the imagery of those buildings prior to them being targeted, put up the schematics to show where the drones and other weapons were being stored, and then to show their own forces coming in and attacking those sections of the buildings that contain those weapons. And then you can see all the secondary and tertiary explosions coming out of it. So it was a brilliant operation on the Israeli side to pull out the practically everything Hezbollah has, and then knocking off their leaders. Now the Iranians are being left without the proxies to fight their war against Israel.
Yeah. Yeah. I read about this whole thing going, my gosh, this seems like a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movie scenario, like getting thousands of pagers to explode at the same time. Then they're finally, like getting through the medical stuff, and then the walkie-talkies start exploding. But yeah, I saw some video this morning where Israel was able to target apartment complexes where they literally were storing like ammunition warehouses among children and families. And I hate to see that, but this is what this is happening in this area, is they hide behind families in order to make their enemy not want to attack them. And yet they hit this building, and then the building blows up for like another 5 or 10 minutes because it was a munitions warehouse within this apartment complex. So really interesting things going on down there. Michael, tell my audience about your book, Big Intel. You did work with the CIA. You're now, a head person for a strategic think tank. Tell us about your book, Big Intel.
Big Intel came out earlier this year, and it's about how the CIA and FBI went from Cold War heroes to deep state villains. So, what happened when the CIA, having been created for the specific purpose of defending America against communism? That was the purpose. Part of the containment policy to contain Soviet expansionism, to fight Soviet subversion, and to wage our defensive capabilities against the Soviets through intelligence and counter subversion, and not through military conflict. So, what happened? What is the CIA doing now? It's internalized that very Marxist doctrine, that cultural Marxism that the Soviets themselves pioneered through their assets in Weimar Germany. This was before Hitler even took power. And then when Hitler did take power, many of those same assets came to our country, and with help of Soviet military intelligence, set up shop at Columbia University to bring us critical theory, critical law theory, critical race theory, genderqueer theory. All of that stuff comes straight out of that line. So Big Intel traces that back all the way to the ideological beginnings of it, and then how it was imposed within the CIA and the FBI and the rest of our intelligence community. So the same with the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover, who was FBI director for 48 years, stuck around way too long, but he was warning the whole time, since before he even went into the FBI as a young man, about communist subversion of our entire society, from politics to churches to the media to Hollywood to business to academia, everything, and warning against it and warning the citizens how to fight against it. Look at the FBI now. It has become everything J. Edgar Hoover warned us against. So that's what Big Intel is about.
Okay. Sounds awesome. I'm going to
And
put
some recommendations on what to do about this. Can we fix it? And if so, how?
Yeah. Tell me about the group where you are a senior analyst. What is the Center for Security Policy?
So the Center for Security Policy is a small group. I've been associated with it on and off for a long time, actually since it was founded in the late 80s. So I've known the founders since then. And so I'm senior analyst for strategy there. We're a small privately funded group. We don't accept any foreign money, and we don't accept any taxpayer money, which is why we're so small. And we look for, we're pretty nimble in what we do. So right now, rather than working to try to shape things at the federal level, we're working with state and county and local law enforcement and others to help them, like DeSantis is doing in Florida, to assert themselves against the central government in order to protect the rights of people in the states and counties and communities. So some of us at the center have a great program to work with sheriffs to help train them in recognizing threats and showing them what to do about it, working with state legislatures to help provide legal tools to fighting certain threats in our country, like Antifa, BLM, other organized criminal rackets for rioting and so forth, and to make sure that the federal central government stays out of state business.
Okay, interesting. Well, I'm going to put a direct link to your Twitter account as well as your book, Big Intel. Thank you so much for coming on, helping us see what's going on through the lens of someone that studies this stuff regularly. It's been very insightful. J. Michael Waller, thank you again. I hope you have a great rest of your day.